I'm going to dedicate this poem to everyone who's suffered through a literary event. Not that anyone's suffering here, but especially the post-literary events, otherwise known as the reception. This is a long poem. It's written in a talky frame of reference, although I do want to show out that each of these are lines, and they're pretty close to 9 or 10 syllables or 5 beats per line. So I don't want you to think I'm just up here reading a paragraph, because I worked on this thing. Anyway, this is after a reading at the Poetry at Tech about 3 or 4 years ago. After the big reading, we end up at the reception, pairing off as usual in mimes of conversation while tracking the famous poet's whereabouts. And tonight, it's Robert Bly in the kitchen, trapped by the overly aftershaved, whose manly outburst of ho 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 soon progress from grating to annoying, since there's no room for us to squeeze in. Catch Bly's soft, slightly lisping voice that must be telling name-dropping stories. So Gary and I cling to each other. Prom nerds at the chips and dip table was not so bad an outcome for me, because we're next to the wine, for one thing. Plus, Gary holds degrees in religion, and I've got questions about Arjuna, the Bhagavad Gita's conflicted hero, because that's 1,000 pages I'm never going to read. But Gary's happy. Gary is happy to fill in my Vedic gaps. Correct me, actually, for this makes us look like we're having a really good talk, rather than just waiting for a chance to wedge ourselves into the kitchen, where there is one spot, but it's up against the fridge door, which keeps getting open. So to stand there, we agree, would be seen as the sad mood of someone desperate to hang out with Robert Bly, which is so not us. Anyway, Gary says, no, 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 Rupert, you got it all wrong. Arjuna was a mortal, not a god. He was a celebrated warrior who looked out over the great Hindu battlefield only to see friends, uncles, teachers lined up on the other side. Arjuna going to tears, no, no, I cannot go kill them, which is the sign for his chariot driver to reveal himself as Lord Krishna, enforcer of duties in all purple glory, commanding, Arjuna, you must fight, you must kill. Warriors war, same as cobblers make shoes. And this caste loyalty back and forth, Gary says, goes on longer than Gone with the Wind. India's social order, woven from the whole cloth of duty. And now I'm wanting to say something to at least look like I'm participating here instead of just nodding along to Gary's spiel. But I'm also remembering Pulp Fiction, one of the famous questions Uma Thurman asked John Travolta, her blind date. When you're in a conversation, do you listen or are you waiting to talk? And even though I know I'm so busted for waiting to talk, I can't help myself. I go, yeah, so Krishna saying warriors have to war, that's like that Ricky Sagg song, don't get above your raisin, isn't it? But Gary frowns like that was really dumb and says, not really. Just as another big ho, ho, ho rolls over us from those kitchen assholes. Yet this one has some catharsis attached to it, because it alerts us to a parallel universe. How we're Arjuna right now. We're schmoozers at a schmooze fest who refuse to leave the chariot and get out there on the battlefield. Where's Krishna when you need him? And sure, it is heady to imagine yourself above the toadies who are now chuckling away at some story, we can catch a few words, about W.S. Merwin having to get naked in Boulder or something like that. And it's the clarity of this moment that forces me to tell Gary my sad hopes for this party, my dream of engaging Robert Bly in deep talk, such a soulful exchange he'd have to remember me. And when my collection comes out, don't ask. He'd gladly provide such an expansive blurb. My stuff would get noticed, reviewed even. And I had even done some prep work. I was going to ask him about his famous dust-up with James Dickey back in the 60s over Dickey's bad boy poem, The Sheep Child, with its wink to bestiality. And then I was going to say, I admire that poem. Sure, some because Dickey was a Buckhead boy, and Bly would think this admirable, quaint even, Southern loyalties and all that rot. But Gary frowns, says, I'm wrong again. Their public spat was more of a Vietnam, Bly's pacifist versus Dickey's warrior, two poets playing out the great anger that had poisoned a confused country. And I say, ha! There we go. We're straight back to Arjuna. Dickey, so immersed in the South, in the Air Force, he had no choice but to be a warrior. But Gary says, no again. No, no, no. Actually, he says, no, no, no. that the whole Southern fighter moral code thing goes all the way back to the Scots-Irish, their unbridled temper. It goes back to Sir Walter Scott even, his story, and perhaps the world's very first short story, Two Drovers, where in the mid-1770s a Scotsman crams his knife deep into a friend's heart over some stupid slight in a public house. And this is such an insight from Gary. I'm caught between grieving over how pitifully unread I am and wanting again to just say something because I've got some Scots-Irish fighting me as well. Plus I'm on my second glass of wine. I say, that's just like Lucinda Williams' song, Greenville, where Townes Van Zandt keeps getting in fights just because somebody looks at him wrong. Oh, looks at him wrong. But Gary says, no. That song was about somebody else. And now I'm really getting weary. I'm really getting weary being corrected all the time. Plus, I'm getting a hammering white wine headache. And I'm realizing I'll never make it into the kitchen, which is really not so bad, since I have so many things mixed up or wrong. So no action from me tonight on the great schmoozing battlefield, which is the usual, although I did shake Jackie Wilson's hand one night, but probably only because my date had really big tits. So I just say, it's getting late, I gotta go. I find a host and thank him because I do have manners. And as I'm leaving, I see Gary has wedged himself into the kitchen. He's up against the refrigerator door, ho-ho-hoing it up with the rest, that whore! But really, it's not such a bad sound to me now. It's just the sound people make when they laugh. What can be pleasing if you're at peace with yourself, with your station in life. And on the way home, I'm pretty much recovered from the whole thing. I'm planning my next career move. It's going to be that Miami conference coming up this winter. Denise Duhamel will be there. She'll like this story. It'll make her laugh. She'll introduce me around. I won't drink so much. It'll be brilliant.